I pulled the platinum band off my finger and held it up to the moonlight. 50 guests on the yacht's deck fell silent as I stood at the railing in my crimson dress, the dress I'd chosen because red meant power, red meant war, red meant I was done being invisible. The wedding ring I'd worn for 14 years caught the harbor lights one last time before I dropped it into the dark waters of Lake Superior. Julian's face went white, then red, his mouth hanging open in shock. Tiffany, his assistant, his lover, his dirty little secret that everyone knew about, clutched his arm tighter, her acrylic nails digging into his expensive suit jacket. The same suit I'd picked out for him last month, using money from my inheritance that he'd convinced me was our money. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Julian hissed, but his voice cracked. For the first time in 14 years, I saw fear in his eyes. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady clear, carrying across the silent deck. "And you, Julian, are about to learn what it feels like to lose everything." Before we go further into this story, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, hit that like button. Subscribe because this story gets so much better. And comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 15 years ago, I was Eleanor Vance, a name that meant something in Minneapolis business circles. I was 26, fresh out of Wharton with an MBA and a reputation for being able to see 5 moves ahead in any negotiation. My father, Richard Vance, had built a successful import-export business from nothing, and he'd raised me to be just as shrewd, just as relentless. When he died suddenly of a heart attack during my final year of business school, he left me everything. $3 million, the family home in Edina, and a Rolodex of contacts that could open any door in the Twin Cities. I met Julian Thorne at a Tech Innovators networking event at the Guthrie Theater. He was 28, handsome in that boy-next-door way that made you trust him immediately, and he had this energy, this enthusiasm that was magnetic. He cornered me by the bar, champagne in hand, and spent 20 minutes pitching me his idea for a software platform that would revolutionize supply chain management. "I'm going to change everything," he said, his eyes bright with ambition. "I just need the right partner, someone who understands business, who has connections, who can see the vision." I should have heard the word need and run. But I was 26 and hungry to prove myself to build something that would make my father proud, even though he was gone. Julian seemed like the perfect vehicle for that ambition. He had the technical knowledge, the charisma to sell, and I had everything else. Money, contacts, business acumen. We were, I thought, the perfect team. We worked together for 6 months before he asked me on a real date. By then, I was already half in love with him, or maybe I was in love with the dream we were building together. It was hard to tell where the business ended and the personal began. We'd spend 18-hour days in the cramped office space I'd rented, surviving on coffee and takeout, mapping out business strategies, arguing over features, celebrating small victories. On our first official date, Julian took me to Manny's Steakhouse, ordered the most expensive bottle of wine, and told me he was falling in love with me. "You're the most incredible woman I've ever met," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "You're brilliant, you're beautiful, and you see me. Really see me, not just the guy with a dream, but the man I'm going to become." 6 months later, we were engaged. My friends thought it was too fast, but I didn't care. I was building an empire with the man I loved. What could be better than that? We got married at the Minneapolis Club, a small ceremony with close friends and family. Julian's mother, Patricia, a brittle woman with a fake smile and expensive pearls, pulled me aside during the reception. "You're very lucky," she said, gripping my arm just a little too tight. "Julian could have had anyone, models, actresses, but he chose you. I hope you appreciate what you have." I should have paid attention to that tone, that subtle warning that I would never be quite good enough. But I was too happy, too wrapped up in the fantasy of our perfect partnership. The first year of marriage was good. We worked side by side, building Thorne Logic, the company Julian had named after himself. Despite the fact that my money had funded it, my contacts had secured the first clients, my strategic planning had shaped the entire business model. But I didn't mind. I loved Julian, and I loved what we were creating together. The cracks started to show in year 2. We'd just landed our first major corporate client, a logistics company that would triple our revenue. I'd spent 6 months courting them using every contact my father had given me, crafting the perfect pitch. When we signed the contract, Julian took me to dinner to celebrate. "This is incredible," I said, holding up my wine glass. "We did it." "I did it," Julian corrected, and there was something in his voice, something sharp. "I mean, we did it, but the technology, the vision, that's all me. You just opened some doors." Just opened some doors. As if 6 months of strategic planning, relationship building, and negotiation was nothing more than making a few phone calls. I laughed it off, told myself he was just excited that he didn't mean it the way it sounded. But he did mean it. Over the next few years, Julian's "I" became more frequent, more pronounced. At investor meetings, he'd present ideas we'd developed together as his own innovations. At conferences, he'd give keynote speeches about his journey building Thorn Logic, barely mentioning me except as my supportive wife. When journalists interviewed him for business magazines, I wasn't in the photos, wasn't quoted, wasn't acknowledged as anything more than a spouse. In year 5, Julian's mother suggested I might want to focus on starting a family instead of distracting Julian with work talk. The suggestion came during a Sunday dinner at her house in Wayzata, her tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion at all. "Eleanor's been such a help to Julian," Patricia said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But now that the company is established, perhaps it's time for her to focus on what women do best: creating a home, being a mother." Julian nodded along, not defending me, not correcting his mother's dismissive assessment of everything I'd contributed. That night, when I tried to talk to him about it, he sighed like I was being difficult. "Mom has a point," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "The company's in a good place. You've done your part. Maybe it's time to think about the next phase of our lives." "My part," I repeated, anger rising. "Julian, I built this company with you. I'm not done. I have ideas, strategies. And I appreciate that," he said, still typing, still not really listening. "But let's be honest, babe. The heavy lifting is done. Now it's just about execution, and that's what I do best. You've got other talents. Use those." Other talents. Like arranging his schedule, like hosting dinner parties for clients, like being decorative and supportive and silent. I started to pull back from the company not because I wanted to, but because Julian made it clear I wasn't welcome in the inner circle anymore. He hired new executives, brought in advisors, made decisions without consulting me. When I objected, he'd smile that patient smile that made me feel like I was being unreasonable. "You're not on the board, Eleanor," he said once after I questioned a major strategic decision. "These are business decisions that don't concern you." "I funded this company," I shot back. "My father's money, my inheritance, it's all in Thorn Logic." "Our money," Julian said smoothly. "We're married? What's yours is mine, remember. That's how marriage works." In year 8, Julian's company went through a massive growth phase. He brought in venture capital, expanded to 3 new cities, hired 50 new employees. The valuation hit $20 million. Julian was featured in Fortune magazine as one of the 30 under 35 a second business leaders to watch. I wasn't mentioned once in the article. At the release party, I stood next to Julian as he gave a speech about his journey, his vision, his success. He thanked his team, his investors, his mentors. He thanked his mother for always believing in him. He thanked our dog walker for keeping our golden retriever happy. He didn't thank me. When I confronted him later that night, he looked genuinely confused. "I thanked you," he said. "I said my beautiful wife at the beginning. You said my beautiful wife and then spent 20 minutes talking about everyone else who'd helped you succeed. I was an afterthought, Julian, a decorative afterthought." God, Eleanor, why do you always have to make everything about you? He was angry now, really angry in a way that frightened me a little. This was my moment, my achievement. Can't you just be happy for me for once? I realized then that in Julian's mind, I hadn't achieved anything. I hadn't built anything. I'd simply been there, a supporting character in his story, and now I was becoming an inconvenient one. Year 10 was when Julian's mother died, and I discovered just how deep the family's dysfunction ran. Patricia left everything to Julian, but there was no everything to leave. She'd spent her entire fortune maintaining appearances, living in a house she couldn't afford, buying designer clothes on credit, gambling away thousands at the Canterbury Park Casino. Julian inherited debt. $60,000 in credit card bills, a reverse mortgage on the house, unpaid medical bills. He came home the day after the funeral and told me we needed to use our savings to pay it off. "She was family," he said. "We take care of family." "Julian, that's $40,000 from my inheritance," I said slowly. "Money my father left me. We were saving that for emergencies, for maybe starting our own family someday." "This is an emergency," Julian snapped. "My mother's reputation is on the line. I won't have people saying Patricia Thorne died in debt." We paid off his mother's debts using money my father had earned, and Julian never paid me back. When I brought it up months later, he looked at me like I was crazy. "Pay you back, Eleanor, we're married. It's not a loan. It's family money, and I used it for family." In year 11, I found the first piece of evidence, though I didn't recognize it as evidence at the time. I was looking for my insurance card in Julian's car when I found a receipt from Crave, an expensive restaurant in the North Loop. The date was from a Tuesday 3 weeks earlier, the night Julian had texted me saying he was working late, eating ramen at his desk. The receipt was for 2 people, $140 worth of food and wine. I told myself it was a client dinner, that there was a reasonable explanation, but my hands were shaking as I took a photo of the receipt before putting it back where I'd found it. 2 weeks later, I found another receipt. This one was from Lowe's Minneapolis Hotel. Room service for 2. Wine, chocolate-covered strawberries, oysters. The date was a Friday night when Julian had told me he was at a conference in Chicago. I didn't confront him. Some instinct told me to wait to gather more information to be sure. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. I noticed the way Julian would tilt his phone away when I walked into a room, the way he'd started showering immediately when he got home, even if he'd showered at the gym, the way he'd switched his phone to silent and face down whenever we were together. In year 12, I met Tiffany Chin for the first time, though I didn't know then what she would become in my life. Julian had hired her as his executive assistant 6 months earlier, and he invited me to the office for a lunch meeting with potential investors. Tiffany was 25, beautiful in that effortless way some young women are, with long dark hair and a smile that seemed perpetually amused by some private joke. When I walked into Julian's office, she was sitting on the edge of his desk, her hand on his arm, laughing at something he'd said. "Mrs. Thorne," she said, and the way she said it made my title sound like an insult. "Julian's told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, extending my hand. Her handshake was limp, dismissive. She looked me up and down, taking in my conservative dress, my minimal makeup, my practical shoes, and I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was measuring me, finding me wanting, deciding I wasn't a threat. "Of course," Tiffany said, turning back to Julian. "Your wife is lovely, so elegant, so classic." Classic. The word women use when they mean old-fashioned, outdated, past your prime. Julian didn't notice the insult, or if he did, he didn't care. He smiled at Tiffany, a warm, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "Tiffany's been incredible," Julian said. "Best hire I've ever made. She anticipates everything I need before I even know I need it." The way he said it, the intimacy in his tone, sent a chill down my spine. I looked at Tiffany, and she looked back at me with that same amused smile, and I knew with absolute certainty that she was sleeping with my husband. But knowing and being able to prove it were 2 different things. And some part of me, the part that had invested 14 years in this marriage, didn't want to know, didn't want to face the reality that would shatter everything I'd built my life around. So I pretended. I smiled through that lunch meeting. I laughed at Julian's jokes. I played the role of the supportive wife so well that even I almost believed it. But at night, alone in our bed while Julian worked late, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder when I'd become someone who accepted so little. When had I decided that being tolerated was enough? When had I stopped believing I deserved more? Year 13 was the year I became a ghost in my own home. Julian was barely there anymore, working 16-hour days, he said, though I knew now that many of those hours weren't spent working at all. He'd come home after midnight, slip into bed without a word, and be gone before I woke up. We'd go days without a real conversation. For my 40th birthday, Julian bought me a Peloton bike. I thought you could use it, he said, not looking at me. You've been talking about wanting to get in shape. I'd never mentioned wanting to get in shape, but the message was clear. I was getting old, getting soft, and it was embarrassing to him. Tiffany, 25 and toned and vibrant, was everything I apparently wasn't. That night, I sat on that Peloton bike still in the living room where it had been delivered, and I cried. Not soft, delicate tears, but ugly, desperate sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. I cried for the 26-year-old woman I'd been so full of fire and ambition. I cried for the marriage I thought I'd had. I cried for all the years I'd wasted trying to earn love from someone who didn't respect me. My brother Ben found me there 2 hours later. He'd come by to wish me happy birthday, had let himself in with the spare key I'd given him years ago. He took one look at me at the Peloton with its bright red bow, and his face darkened. "What the hell, Eleanor?" he said quietly. "What happened to you?" "I'm fine," I said, automatically wiping my face. "Just a rough day." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine for years. I've watched you disappear bit by bit, and I haven't said anything because I thought you were happy. But you're not happy. You're miserable." "I love him," I whispered. "Love isn't supposed to feel like this," Ben said, sitting down next to me. "Love isn't supposed to make you smaller. Love isn't supposed to hurt this much." He stayed with me that night, ordering pizza, putting on old movies we'd watched as kids, trying to make me laugh. Before he left, he hugged me tight. "Ellie," he said, using the childhood nickname he hadn't used in years, "you deserve so much more than this. You know that, right?" I nodded, but I didn't believe it. Not yet. The breaking point came 6 months before that anniversary party on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I'd had a dentist appointment that got canceled at the last minute, so I came home earlier than planned. Our penthouse, the beautiful space I'd designed and decorated with such care, was quiet. Too quiet. I heard them before I saw them. Julian's voice, rough with desire, saying things he'd never said to me. Tiffany's breathy laugh, young and carefree. The sound of bodies moving together of pleasure I hadn't witnessed in my own marriage in years. I stood in the hallway of my own home frozen, listening to my husband have sex with another woman in the bed we'd shared for 14 years. Part of me wanted to burst in to scream to make a scene. But another part, the part that had been dying slowly for so long, simply observed it all with a strange detachment. This was my life. This was what I'd accepted, what I'd enabled by staying silent, by pretending, by making myself small enough to fit into the corner of Julian's world. I left without making a sound. I went to a coffee shop, sat with a latte I didn't drink, and stared at nothing. Hours passed. My phone buzzed with texts from Julian. "Working late tonight, don't wait up." "Grabbed dinner at the office." "Love you." That last text, that casual lie, broke something fundamental inside me. He'd just finished having sex with his assistant in our bed, and he had the audacity to text me, "Love you," like it was just another Tuesday. I texted back, "Love you too." Then I called my brother. "I need your help," I said when he answered. "I'm ready." Ben showed up at the coffee shop 30 minutes later. I told him everything. About finding them in our home, about the years of dismissal and disrespect, about feeling like I was disappearing. "I want to leave," I said, "but I don't know how. Everything is tangled together. The money, the house, the company, I don't even know where to start." "We start by getting you help," Ben said firmly. "Real help. Lawyers, investigators, people who can protect you and what's yours." "I don't want to be vindictive." I started, but Ben cut me off. "This isn't about being vindictive, Ellie. This is about protecting yourself from someone who's been stealing from you for years. Because that's what Julian's done. He's stolen your money, your credit for your work, your self-respect, and your time. He doesn't get to steal anything else." That night, after Julian came home smelling like Tiffany's perfume and headed straight for the shower, I made my first call. To Judge Evelyn Reed, my neighbor, a woman I'd had coffee with dozens of times but never confided in. Evelyn picked up on the second ring. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" "No," I said, and my voice only shook a little. "Nothing is all right, and I need help." There was a brief pause. Then Evelyn said, "Come up, I'll put the kettle on." Evelyn Reed's penthouse was 2 floors above mine, decorated in rich jewel tones with art on every wall. She met me at the door in silk pajamas and a cashmere robe, looking elegant even at 10 p.m. "Sit," she said, guiding me to her sofa. "Tell me everything." I told her. All of it. 14 years spilling out in a rush of words and tears and anger I didn't know I'd been holding. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone in this building. 28 years ago, I was married to a man named Marcus. He was a prominent attorney, charming, successful. On paper, we had a perfect life. In reality, he was sleeping with his paralegal, embezzling from his firm, and systematically destroying my sense of self-worth." "What did you do?" I whispered. "I gathered evidence," Evelyn said. "I documented everything. Then I took him for every penny he had, and I made sure his legal career was over. It took me 2 years to plan and execute, but when it was done, I was free. And he was exactly where he deserved to be." She poured more tea, her hands steady. "Eleanor, you've been victimized. But you don't have to stay a victim. You can fight back, and I can help you do it." "I don't want to be bitter," I said. "I don't want revenge to consume me." "This isn't about revenge," Evelyn said firmly. "This is about justice. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional destructive. Justice is simply making sure people face the consequences of their actions. Julian has been treating you like you're worthless for years. It's time he learned you're not." She made a phone call right then at 10:30 on a Tuesday night to someone named Alexandra Walsh. "Alex," Evelyn said when the lawyer answered, "I'm sending someone to you, a friend who needs the best representation possible in what's going to be a complicated divorce. Are you available?" Whatever Alexandra said made Evelyn smile sharp and satisfied. "Perfect. I'll have her call your office tomorrow to set up a meeting." Over the next 2 weeks, I met with Alexandra Walsh 3 times. She was exactly what I needed: brilliant, ruthless, and completely unimpressed by Julian's charm or success. "Here's what we know," Alexandra said during our 3rd meeting, spreading documents across her massive glass desk. "The penthouse is yours, purchased before the marriage with your inheritance. Thorn Logic was funded with your money, but Julian never gave you equity. Legally, you have no claim to the company, but morally, you built it. The $40,000 you gave him for his mother's debts, that's a gray area. The affair with Tiffany, that's useful for divorce proceedings, but Minnesota is a no-fault state, so it won't matter as much as we'd like." "So, what do I have?" I asked. "You have your property, your inheritance, and your dignity," Alexandra said. "But more importantly, you have time to prepare. Julian doesn't know you're planning to leave. That gives us a massive advantage. We can gather evidence, secure your assets, and make sure that when you do leave, you do it on your terms, not his." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Eleanor, I need you to be patient. I need you to keep pretending everything is fine while we build an airtight case. Can you do that?" I thought about 14 years of pretending. What was a few more months? "Yes," I said. "I can do that." Alexandra smiled. "Good. Then let's burn his world down." The next person Ben insisted I talk to was Sarah Chin. She'd worked in IT at Thorn Logic for 2 years before leaving abruptly 6 months earlier. Ben had run into her at a mutual friend's party, and she'd made some cryptic comments about Julian that had stuck with him. I met Sarah at a park in northeast Minneapolis on a Saturday morning. She looked nervous, constantly glancing around like Julian might materialize out of thin air. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. "I almost didn't come," Sarah admitted. "Julian can be vindictive. When I quit, he tried to blacklist me from other tech companies in the cities. It didn't work, but he tried." "Why did you quit?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Sarah took a deep breath. "I found something. Actually, I found a lot of somethings. Julian has been embezzling from Thorn Logic for the past 3 years. Not huge amounts at a time, but consistent. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. He approves his own expenses, so there's no oversight. He uses the company credit card for personal purchases, then reimburses himself from the company account for business expenses he never actually incurred. It's clever small enough that no one notices, but over 3 years it adds up to over $200,000. My hands clenched. And you reported this to Brad Morrison, the CFO, Sarah said. He's Julian's college roommate and best friend. Brad laughed at me, told me I was mistaken, that I clearly didn't understand how executive compensation worked. 2 weeks later, I was fired. They said it was performance issues, but we both knew it was because I'd found the truth. Do you have proof? I asked. Sarah pulled out a flash drive. I kept copies of everything. Expense reports, credit card statements, bank transfers. It's all here. I was going to go to the board, but then I chickened out. I was scared of what Julian might do to my career. But Eleanor, if you need this, if you're finally going to do something about him, it's yours. I took the flash drive like it was made of gold. Thank you. This means everything. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. The affair with Tiffany, it's not the first. There was a woman before her, a client from about 18 months ago. Her name was Rebecca. I only know because I overheard a phone call between Julian and Brad where Julian was panicking because Rebecca was threatening to tell you unless Julian left his wife. Brad talked him down, told him to ghost Rebecca and double down on the relationship with you, make you feel secure so you wouldn't believe Rebecca if she did reach out. My stomach turned. Did she reach out? I don't know, Sarah said. But I thought you should know that Tiffany isn't special. She's just the current one. Julian has a pattern. I drove home that day with evidence of embezzlement, evidence of multiple affairs, and a cold, hard determination settling in my chest. Julian had made a career out of underestimating me, dismissing me, treating me like I was too stupid or too passive to fight back. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been. Evelyn became my strategist, the woman who'd been through this before and knew all the traps to avoid. We met every few days, usually in the morning after Julian left for work, drinking coffee in her elegant living room while we planned my liberation. The key, Evelyn said, is to control the narrative. Julian will try to paint you as unstable, emotional, vindictive. We need to make sure that every action you take is documented, justified, and impossible to argue with. She introduced me to Maria Santos, a private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. Maria was ex-military police, now running her own firm, with a no-nonsense attitude that I found incredibly reassuring. I'll need access to his calendar, his usual routes, his patterns, Maria said at our first meeting. And I'll need patience. Good surveillance takes time. How much time? I asked. Give me a month, Maria said. I'll get you everything you need. She was better than her word. Within 3 weeks, Maria had photographs, videos, and documented evidence of Julian's affair. Him and Tiffany entering hotels together in the middle of workdays, kissing in parking garages, holding hands in restaurants in suburbs 40 miles outside Minneapolis where they thought no one would recognize them. But the most damning evidence came from Julian's own technology. Maria had hired a digital forensics expert who'd recovered deleted text messages from Julian's cloud backup. He'd been sloppy about security, using the same password for everything, never enabling two-factor authentication. The texts were devastating. Julian calling me the ball and chain and the obligation. Him complaining to Tiffany that I was letting myself go and past my prime at 40. Him promising Tiffany that once the divorce was final, they'd sell the penthouse, split the money, and move somewhere exciting. California maybe, or New York. She'll fight it, Julian had texted. But she has no leverage. The company's mine, the success is mine. She'll end up with some token settlement and I'll be free. Reading those messages, I felt something crystallize inside me. It wasn't hurt anymore. It was pure, cold, strategic thinking. Julian had underestimated me one too many times, and now I was going to show him exactly how big a mistake that was. The planning took 3 months. 3 months of playing the dutiful wife, of smiling at Julian over breakfast, of pretending I didn't know that every time he worked late he was really with Tiffany. 3 months of gathering documents, securing accounts, building an airtight case. Ben helped me move money. Not all of it, just enough to make sure I couldn't be financially trapped. We opened new accounts in my name, only transferred my inheritance funds to banks Julian didn't know about. We made copies of every important document, every receipt, every record. "You're sure about this?" Ben asked one night as we organized files in my office. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. "Good," Ben said. Because once you light this match, there's no going back. Julian's world is going to burn, and he's going to take it personally. Let him, I said. I'm done caring about his feelings. Alexandra drew up divorce papers, but we didn't file them. Not yet. The plan was to wait for the perfect moment, the moment where Julian was most vulnerable, most exposed, most certain of his own invincibility. That moment came when Julian decided to throw a massive anniversary party. 10 years since he'd founded Thorn Logic, and he wanted to celebrate with everyone who mattered in Minneapolis tech circles. It's going to be at the rooftop event space, Julian told me one morning, not looking up from his phone. I've already hired the caterers, sent the invitations. Make sure you look nice, okay? This is important for my image. His image. Not our image, not our celebration. His. Of course, I said sweetly. I'll make sure I look perfect. I went shopping with Evelyn the week before the party. We went to Saks, to the kind of boutiques where personal shoppers bring you champagne while you try on dresses that cost more than some people's monthly rent. The dress we chose was red, not a soft, demure red. A bold blood red that demanded attention. It was elegant but powerful, sophisticated but impossible to ignore. That's the one, Evelyn said when I came out of the dressing room. That's the dress of a woman who's about to take back her life. I bought new shoes, had my hair done, got a manicure. I wanted to look perfect, not for Julian, but for me. For the woman I used to be and was about to become again. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Julian, listening to him snore, thinking about everything that was about to happen. Tomorrow night, I would stop pretending. Tomorrow night, I would show Julian and everyone else exactly who Eleanor Vance really was. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The party started at 7. I arrived at 8, making an entrance, deliberately letting everyone see me in that red dress. The rooftop space was beautiful, all string lights and panoramic views of downtown Minneapolis. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A jazz trio played in the corner. It was exactly the kind of party Julian loved, full of important people who could admire him. Julian was already drunk when I arrived. He was holding court near the bar, Tiffany attached to his arm like an accessory. She wore a black dress that was too tight, too short, trying too hard to compete with women who had the confidence of professional accomplishment, not just youth. I circulated through the party, talking to people I'd known for years. Investors who'd originally come to Thorn Logic because of my connections. Clients I'd brought in during the early days. Board members who'd been my father's friends before they were Julian's. Eleanor, Marcus Chin, said one of the original investors. It's been too long. I've missed seeing you at company events. I've been busy, I said with a smile. Actually, I'm thinking about going back into consulting. I miss the work. You should, Marcus said enthusiastically. You were always the strategic brains of this operation. Half the innovations Julian claims were really your ideas. I remember those early pitch meetings. You were the one who had all the answers. That's kind of you to say, I replied, filing away his words for future reference. Around 9:30, Julian's speech began. He stood at the front of the space microphone in hand, Tiffany gazing up at him adoringly from the side. Thank you all for being here. Julian said his words slightly slurred. 10 years ago, I had a dream. A vision of changing how supply chains work, of revolutionizing logistics through technology. And tonight, we're celebrating how far we've come. He talked for 15 minutes about his vision, his hard work, his innovation. He thanked investors, board members, employees, mentors. He thanked the jazz trio. He thanked the caterers. He didn't mention me once. When he was done, people applauded politely. I saw a few uncomfortable looks, people who knew the real history, who remembered that I'd been there at the beginning. But no one said anything. No one ever did. By 10, Julian was dangerously drunk. I watched him from across the room as he got sloppier, louder. He pulled Tiffany close, whispered in her ear, his hand sliding down her back in a way that was completely inappropriate for a married man at a professional event. Some of his employees noticed. I saw the glances, the raised eyebrows, the whispered conversations. Julian's behavior had become an open secret, and people were starting to talk. That's when I made my move. I walked across the rooftop space, my heels clicking on the wooden deck, my red dress impossible to miss. Conversations quieted as I passed. People watched, sensing something was about to happen. I stopped in front of Julian and Tiffany. They were laughing about something, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. The intimacy was undeniable. "Julian," I said, my voice calm, "could I speak with you privately?" He turned his eyes glassy with alcohol and annoyance. "What is it, Eleanor? I'm in the middle of something." "I can see exactly what you're in the middle of," I said evenly. "I was hoping we could discuss it away from your employees." "Discuss what?" Julian's voice got louder, defensive. "The fact that I'm at my own party, celebrating my own success." "Your success," I repeated. "Right." "What's that supposed to mean?" He was getting aggressive now, stepping closer, using his height to intimidate me. It was a tactic that had worked for years, making me shrink back, making me quiet. Not anymore. "It means," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent rooftop, "that I've been standing in your shadow for 14 years, while you took credit for my work, spent my money, and destroyed my self-respect. And I'm done." Julian laughed, loud and mocking. Tiffany giggled nervously, clutching his arm. Some of Julian's younger employees, the ones who'd only ever known him as the CEO, joined in with uncomfortable laughter. "Your work," Julian sneered. "Eleanor, you made some phone calls. You introduced me to some people. That's not work, that's being a wife. That's what you were supposed to do." "I secured your first 5 clients," I said, still calm. "I developed your 3-year strategic plan. I funded your company with $3 million of my inheritance. I covered your mother's debts when she died bankrupt. I built Thorn Logic as much as you did, but you've spent a decade erasing me from that story." People were staring now, openly listening. Julian's face went from mocking to furious in seconds. "You're embarrassing yourself," he hissed. "You're embarrassing me." "No," I said. "You embarrassed me. You humiliated me. You treated me like I was nothing, like I was just an obligation you had to tolerate while you built your real life with women like Tiffany." Tiffany's face went white. Several people gasped. The jazz trio had stopped playing. "You're crazy," Julian said, but his voice shook slightly. "You're having some kind of breakdown." "I'm completely sane," I said. "For the first time in years, I'm seeing clearly. And what I see is a man who's been lying to me, stealing from me, and disrespecting me for so long that he actually believes I'm too weak to do anything about it." I pulled off my wedding ring. The platinum band caught the string lights, the 5-carat diamond flashing, as I held it up for everyone to see. "I'm done being your shadow," I said. "I'm done being the wife you parade around when it's convenient and ignore when it's not. I'm done pretending that you're anything more than a mediocre man who got lucky because a brilliant woman loved him enough to give him everything." "You can't do this," Julian said, and there was panic in his voice now. "Eleanor, don't!" But I was already moving. I walked to his table, picked up his champagne glass, and dropped the ring into it. The sound of platinum hitting crystal was sharp clear. The champagne sloshed. The glass tipped, fell shattered on the expensive deck in an explosion of crystal shards and diamonds and golden liquid spreading across the wood. The rooftop exploded in gasps, whispers, shocked exclamations. Someone said, "Oh my God!" Someone else started filming on their phone. Tiffany was frozen, her hand over her mouth. Julian stood there, champagne dripping down his pants, staring at the shattered glass at his feet like he couldn't process what had just happened. "That's a 5-carat diamond," he said stupidly. I corrected. "It was a symbol of a marriage that stopped existing the first time you cheated on me. Now it's just trash on the floor, exactly where it belongs." I turned and walked toward the elevator, my head high, my spine straight. Behind me, I heard Julian start to sputter, heard Tiffany's nervous, high-pitched voice trying to calm him down, heard the explosion of conversation as 50 people started talking at once. The elevator doors opened. Evelyn Reed stepped out, phone in hand, a small smile on her face. "That was perfect," she said quietly. "I got it all on video." "Good," I said, my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking with adrenaline. "We're going to need it." We rode down to my floor together. Harold, the building security guard who'd watched Julian's behavior for years and clearly disapproved, was waiting at my door with the locksmith. "All done, Mrs. Thorne," the locksmith said, handing me a new set of keys. "Changed the locks, upgraded the security system, installed cameras at all entry points. No one's getting in here without your permission." "Thank you," I said, and meant it with everything in me. All of Julian's belongings were already packed, stacked in the building's storage area in dozens of cardboard boxes. Ben and I had spent the previous week carefully removing every trace of Julian from the penthouse. His clothes, his golf clubs, his collection of expensive watches, his college memorabilia, everything. I'd labeled each box with meticulous care. Borrowed dreams. Tuesday's lies. The 2024 verdict. And my personal favorite, the box containing the cashmere scarf Tiffany had left in Julian's car 6 months ago, labeled "Gift from Accounting." Evelyn came into the penthouse with me bringing a bottle of Dom Perignon that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "To freedom," she said, pouring us each a glass. "To justice," I corrected, and we toasted. We were sitting on my couch decompressing from the evening's drama when the pounding started. Julian bellowing my name, slamming his fists against the door hard enough that I worried he might actually break through. "Eleanor, Eleanor, open this goddamn door right now!" Evelyn stood smoothly, straightening her elegant dress. "Allow me." When she opened the door, Julian nearly fell into the hallway. He was even drunker now, his tie hanging loose, his face red with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted, then stopped when he saw Evelyn. "Judge Reed. What is this? This is called facing consequences," Evelyn said coolly. She handed him a manila envelope. "I believe you should read this." Julian ripped it open with shaking hands. I watched his face cycle through confusion, shock, horror as he looked at the contents. Photographs of him and Tiffany. Screenshots of their text messages, including the ones where he called me the ball and chain. Evidence of his multiple affairs. Documentation of the embezzlement Sarah had discovered. "Welcome home, Julian," Evelyn said pleasantly. "Oh, wait. This isn't your home anymore, is it? This is Eleanor's home, purchased with her money before you were married. You have absolutely no legal claim to it." "You can't do this," Julian said, but his voice was weak now, frightened. "Eleanor, please, we can talk about this. I made mistakes, okay, I know that. But we can work through this." "No," I said, standing up so we were facing each other. "We can't. Because this isn't just mistakes, Julian. This is 14 years of systematic betrayal. You didn't just cheat on me. You erased me. You took credit for my work, spent my money, humiliated me publicly, and made me feel like I was crazy for thinking I deserved better." "I'm sorry," he said, and tears were rolling down his face now. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I don't know what happened to us." "I know what happened," I said. "You decided I wasn't important enough to respect, and I decided to believe you." Alexandra Walsh stepped out from the bedroom where she'd been waiting. Julian's eyes widened when he saw her. "Mr. Thorne," Alexandra said crisply, "I'm Alexandra Walsh, Mrs. Thorne's attorney. You'll be officially served with divorce papers on Monday, but consider this a courtesy notification. You have no claim to this property. Any attempt to enter this penthouse without Mrs. Thorne's permission will be considered trespassing. Additionally, we'll be forwarding evidence of your embezzlement to the Thorne Logic Board of Directors first thing Monday morning." "Embezzlement?" Julian's voice climbed an octave. "That's a lie. That's a malicious lie." "It's documented fact," Alexandra said. $200,000 over 3 years. We have the records, the receipts, the bank transfers. You've been stealing from your own company, Mr. Thorne." Julian tried to push past Evelyn into the penthouse. That's when Officer David Miller stepped forward from where he'd been standing in the hallway just out of sight. "I wouldn't do that, sir," Officer Miller said firmly. "The restraining order goes into effect immediately. You need to leave now, or I'll be forced to arrest you." "Restraining order?" Julian's voice was shrill now, desperate. "This is insane. You're all insane. Harassment, public humiliation, financial abuse." Alexandra ticked off on her fingers. "We have documentation of everything, witnesses, video evidence. Now leave Mr. Thorne or spend the night in jail." Julian left, but not quietly. He screamed, threatened lawsuits, promised revenge. He called me every name in the book, his true colors finally showing, without the veneer of charm to hide them. Harold and Officer Miller eventually had to physically escort him to the parking garage. After he was gone, I sank onto my couch, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving me shaking and exhausted. "You did it," Evelyn said, sitting beside me. "The hardest part is over." "It doesn't feel over," I said. "Because it's not," Alexandra said practically. "Now comes the legal battle. But Eleanor, you have every advantage. He has nothing. No claim to your property, no moral high ground, no public sympathy. All he has is rage and a growing realization that he destroyed the best thing in his life." That first night after leaving Julian, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, convinced he was trying to break in. But the upgraded security system held. Julian didn't come back. Instead, he started calling, texting, leaving voicemails that oscillated between apologetic and threatening. By Monday morning, Sarah Chin had sent the embezzlement evidence to the 4 board members who weren't Julian's personal friends. Their reaction was swift and brutal. Julian was suspended pending an internal investigation. By Wednesday, he was fired. Thorn Logic issued a statement about financial irregularities and breach of fiduciary duty. Julian's lawyer sent increasingly desperate emails to Alexandra, trying to negotiate, trying to find some leverage. There wasn't any. Then, unexpectedly, Tiffany called me. "Mrs. Thorne." Her voice was small, scared nothing like the confident woman who'd perched on Julian's desk 6 months ago. "What do you want, Tiffany?" I asked, not unkindly. "Can we meet? Please, I need to talk to you." We met at a coffee shop in northeast Minneapolis. Tiffany looked terrible. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red and puffy, her designer clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. "He dumped me," she said without preamble. "After the party, after everything. He said I was an embarrassment, that I'd ruined his life by not being discreet." I sipped my coffee, waiting. "I need you to understand something," Tiffany continued, her hands shaking. "He told me you were crazy. He said you'd stolen his inheritance, that you were controlling and abusive. He said he was terrified of you but couldn't leave because you'd destroy him financially." "And you believed him," I said. "Yes," Tiffany whispered. "I'm 27 years old. I thought I was special. I thought he really loved me. But after he fired me, after he threw me away, the second I became inconvenient, I started asking questions, talking to people, finding out the truth." She pulled out her phone. "He made me promises. Marriage, a promotion to VP, a house in the suburbs. He said once the divorce was final, we'd sell your penthouse and move to California. He was going to make me the new Mrs. Thorne. He was going to sell my home," I asked, ice in my voice. "He'd already contacted a realtor," Tiffany said miserably. "I have the emails. He told me you wouldn't be able to stop him, that he had lawyers who'd prove the penthouse was marital property, even though you bought it before the marriage." She showed me her phone. Hundreds of text messages, dozens of voicemails. Julian promising her everything, lying about everything, painting me as the villain in our story. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because he's a liar," Tiffany said fiercely. "Because he used both of us. Because I threw away my reputation, my career, my self-respect for a man who called me an embarrassment the second things got hard. I want him to pay for what he did. Forward all of this to my lawyer," I said, writing down Alexandra's email. "Every text, every voicemail, every email. It will help." "I'm sorry," Tiffany said as I stood to leave, "for what I did to you, for being part of his lies." "You were young and he was a skilled manipulator," I said. "But Tiffany, learn from this. Never again let a man convince you that you're only valuable as his secret. You deserve to be someone's priority, not someone's option." The mediation was scheduled for 2 weeks after the party. Julian showed up looking like he'd aged 10 years. He'd lost weight, his suit was cheap and ill-fitting, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His lawyer, Martin Chin, looked uncomfortable, like he knew this was a losing battle. "Eleanor," Julian started as soon as he saw me, "please, we don't have to do this. We can work it out, all of it. I'll go to therapy. I'll make changes. Just please don't destroy me. Sit down, Mr. Thorne, Alexandra said coldly. We're not here for reconciliation. We're here to finalize the divorce terms. The mediation lasted 8 grueling hours. Julian's lawyer tried everything. They claimed I was emotionally unstable, that I'd orchestrated a public humiliation to damage Julian's reputation. Alexandra calmly presented the video evidence of Julian publicly humiliating me for years, of him openly carrying on an affair at company events, of him telling me I was nothing in front of 50 witnesses. They claimed the penthouse was marital property. Alexandra produced the deed purchased 2 years before our marriage entirely in my name, funded entirely with my inheritance. They claimed Julian deserved spousal support since he'd lost his job because of my actions. Alexandra presented evidence that he'd lost his job because he'd been embezzling, which had nothing to do with me. Then Alexandra laid out the embezzlement evidence in detail: the fake expense reports, the personal charges on company credit cards, the consulting fees paid to shell companies Julian controlled. Over $200,000 stolen from his own company over 3 years. Julian's lawyer went pale. Martin whispered urgently to Julian, but Julian just sat there, his face gray. "What do you want?" Julian asked, finally, his voice hoarse. "You're going to sign away any claim to Eleanor's property," Alexandra said. "You're going to agree to a divorce with no alimony, no settlement. You're going to sign a non-disparagement agreement. You will not speak about Eleanor Thorne. You will not contact her. You will not come within 500 feet of her residence or place of business. And you will publicly acknowledge that Eleanor Vance was a founding partner in Thorne Logic and deserves credit for the company's early success. And if I refuse," Julian tried to sound defiant, but just sounded desperate, "then we file criminal charges for embezzlement," Alexandra said simply. "And you go to prison. Federal prison, Mr. Thorne, because you used wire transfers, which makes it a federal crime. You'll spend 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary, lose any professional licenses, and be permanently unemployable in any legitimate business." Julian signed. His hand shook as he put pen to paper, signing away his claims to my life piece by piece. He signed the divorce agreement. He signed the non-disparagement clause. He signed the public acknowledgement that I'd been instrumental in Thorne Logic's founding. "We're done here," Alexandra said, gathering papers. "Mr. Thorne, you'll receive the final documentation within 30 days. Do not contact my client. Do not attempt to see her. Move on with your life." I stood ready to leave, but Julian grabbed my arm. 14 years, he said, tears streaming down his face. "We had 14 years together. That has to mean something." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. It did mean something. It meant I wasted 14 years loving someone who never loved me back. It meant I sacrificed my ambitions for someone who'd have thrown me away the second a younger model came along. It meant I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew, and that I'll never again mistake being tolerated for being loved. I pulled my arm free and walked out. I didn't look back. The weeks after the divorce were strange. I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there. But I also felt unmoored, uncertain. I'd spent 14 years defining myself in relation to Julian, and now I had to figure out who Eleanor Vance was without him. I started therapy with Dr. Patricia Moore, who specialized in recovery from emotional abuse. "What Julian did to you," Dr. Moore said in our first session, "was systematic psychological abuse. Financial control, isolation from your career and identity, public humiliation, emotional manipulation. These are classic abuse tactics." "But he never hit me," I said. "He wasn't physically violent." "Abuse doesn't have to be physical to be devastating," Dr. Moore said gently. "He hit your self-esteem, your confidence, your sense of worth. That's abuse, Eleanor, and it's okay to acknowledge that." It took weeks of therapy before I could say it out loud. I was in an abusive marriage. Once I could name it, I could start healing from it. I started my consulting business, Eleanor Vance Consulting. My first client was Marcus Chin, one of Thorne Logic's original investors. "I should have reached out years ago," Marcus said when he hired me. "Everyone in the industry knew you were the brains behind Julian's early strategy. Letting you walk away was the stupidest thing he ever did. Within 3 months, I had more clients than I could handle. Former Thorn Logic contacts people who'd known me in the early days, business leaders who were tired of men like Julian getting credit for women's work. My company grew faster than I'd dreamed possible. Sarah Chin became my director of operations. Working for you, she said, is nothing like working for Julian. You listen. You value people. You share credit. It's revolutionary. Evelyn and I started the Lock Club on a Tuesday afternoon over lunch. We'd been talking about all the women we knew who were stuck in bad relationships, who didn't know how to leave or didn't think they could. We should help them, Evelyn said, not as professionals but as women who've survived and thrived. Like a support group, I suggested. Like a revolution, Evelyn said with that sharp smile I'd come to love. The Lock Club met every other week in my penthouse. We created a safe space for women to share their stories, their strategies, their victories. We brought in lawyers, financial advisors, therapists. We built a network of support so comprehensive that no woman who came to us had to face leaving alone. It grew beyond anything we'd imagined. 50 members became 100. We started chapters in other cities. Women would tell us that the Lock Club had saved their lives, had given them permission to save themselves. As New Year's Eve approached, I decided to host a celebration, not just for me, but for all of us, for every woman who'd found the courage to lock the door on someone who didn't deserve access to their life. I wore red again, another statement dress paired with the diamond earrings Evelyn had given me. They'd been made from her late husband's cufflinks, a symbol of what real partnership looked like. The party was perfect. Laughter, music, champagne, genuine joy. Around 11:30, as we were preparing for the midnight countdown, the commotion started at the door. Julian's voice loud and aggressive. "I have every right to be here. This was my home." I walked to the door. Harold and Officer Miller were blocking Julian's entry. Tiffany was with him, clinging to his arm desperately. "We're back together," Tiffany announced shrilly, like she'd won some prize. "We wanted to tell you in person." I looked at her, this young woman who'd learned nothing and felt only pity. "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "You deserve each other." "This isn't over." Julian said, his voice ugly with rage. "You destroyed my life, Eleanor. You destroyed everything." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed your own life. I just stopped cleaning up your messes." Officer Miller moved forward. "Sir, you're violating the restraining order. You need to leave now." "She took everything from me," Julian shouted. "My company, my home, my reputation. She's a vindictive bitch who couldn't handle the fact that I outgrew her." Evelyn appeared at my shoulder, champagne glass in hand. She raised it toward the assembled guests, her voice carrying. "Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to new beginnings. To women who recognize their worth after years of being undervalued. To understanding that karma, like justice, always arrives right on time." She looked at Julian with that sharp, dangerous smile. "And to Mr. Julian Thorne, who taught us all that sometimes the best renovation you can do to your home is removing the garbage." The penthouse erupted in cheers and applause. Julian's face went purple with rage. He lunged forward, trying to push past Officer Miller, but David was ready. In seconds, Julian was in handcuffs. "You're under arrest for violating a restraining order," Officer Miller said calmly. "You have the right to remain silent." As Julian was led away, still shouting about injustice and conspiracies, Alexandra appeared with her business card. "Ms. Chin," she said to Tiffany, "when a man treats his wife like trash, you're not special because he picks you up. You're just next. Call me if you need help getting away from him." "Ma?" Tiffany took the card with shaking hands and ran after Julian, still clinging to her fantasy. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. I stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows surrounded by friends who'd become family. 7, 6, 5. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd gained, everything I'd become. 4, 3, 2, 1. Midnight. New year. New life. The fireworks exploded over Minneapolis, painting the sky in gold and silver and red. "How do you feel?" Ben asked, coming to stand beside me. "Free," I said. Finally free. 3 months later, Julian called from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Eleanor." His voice was broken, defeated, unrecognizable. "I need help. I'm being evicted. Tiffany left me for someone else. My mother's friends won't return my calls. Ben blocked me. The board blacklisted me. I'm going to be homeless. Please, for everything we had, help me." Part of me, the part that had loved him once, felt a twinge of pity. But the stronger part, the part that had survived his betrayal, knew better. "Julian," I said gently, "you taught me something invaluable. You taught me that I don't owe anyone my happiness, my money, or my peace of mind. You taught me that love without respect is worthless. You taught me that I deserve better." "So, you won't help me?" His voice turned bitter, angry, the Julian I'd come to know. "I can't help you," I said. "You need to help yourself. Get a job. Live within your means. Stop blaming everyone else for consequences you created, and maybe someday you'll understand what you threw away." I hung up. He called back 17 times. I blocked the number. 6 months after the divorce, Eleanor Vance Consulting had 20 employees and an office downtown. The Lock Club had chapters in 5 cities and over 300 members. I was featured in Minneapolis Business Journal as one of the 50 most influential women in business. Judge Evelyn Reed and I were invited to speak at events about female empowerment, about surviving emotional abuse, about rebuilding after you've been torn down. I dated. Some good, some bad, some hilariously terrible stories I shared with the Lock Club over wine. I learned what I actually wanted: someone who celebrated my success instead of feeling threatened by it, who made me laugh instead of making me small, who saw me as an equal partner in life. I learned that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who made me feel lonely. I learned that my worth wasn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. I learned that I was enough all by myself, but even better when surrounded by people who actually valued me. On the 1-year anniversary of throwing my ring into Julian's champagne glass, the Lock Club threw me a celebration. It was intimate, just the core group of women who'd been there from the beginning. Sarah gave me a sculpture of a woman breaking free from chains. "For teaching us how," she said. Evelyn gave a speech. "A year ago, Eleanor did the hardest thing a person can do. She walked away from everything familiar, even though it was destroying her. She chose the terrifying unknown over the unbearable known. And look at her now, thriving, glowing, free, successful beyond what Julian ever achieved. Let her story be proof that it's never too late to save yourself." Looking around at these incredible women, each with their own survival story, I felt profound gratitude. I'd lost 14 years to someone who didn't value me, but I'd gained something far more valuable myself: my strength, my voice, my unshakable knowledge of my own worth, and I was never giving that away again. So here's what I learned, what I want you to remember. You are not defined by who loves you. You are defined by how you love yourself. Your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to see it. Your value exists whether or not anyone recognizes it. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't wait 14 years like I did. Don't make excuses for disrespect, for dismissiveness, for cruelty disguised as honesty. You deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. You deserve to be cherished, not endured. You deserve a life where you are not shrinking yourself to make room for someone else's ego. And if you have to throw a ring into a champagne glass and walk away from everything you've built to get that life, do it. The temporary pain of leaving is nothing compared to the permanent pain of staying. I'm Eleanor Vance, and this is my story. The story of how I stopped being someone's shadow and became my own light. Now, I have a question for you. If you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing before entering a toxic relationship, what would it be? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, hit that like button. Subscribe, because I'm sharing more stories of women who fought back and won. And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to save yourself. Because it's not. It's never too late. Your life is waiting for you. Go claim it.